It is time. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to stand up. It's time for Christians to come together, to share their testimony, to join their brothers and sisters as we answer the call. Folks, it's time to wake up the lions. And I have an absolute lion with me today, telling his story, putting things in the written form for folks to learn. This gentleman is a father of seven. Okay, and that qualifies him to be on this show like nobody's business. He's a speaker. He's the author of the book "God's Imperfect Plan is Perfect," and he also has a Christ-centered 12-step recovery community that he has put together and is building as we speak. This gentleman is doing all sorts of good works in his name, and I can't wait to hear his story. For you folks on this podcast, please welcome Steve Rotermund to the show. Steve, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great today, Roy. Thanks for having me on this show. I really appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And I had the absolute great privilege of interviewing you yesterday for
Yes, you did.
one of my other podcasts, Power Man. And man, I had a great time, listening to you and learning from you and hearing your story. With this podcast today, we certainly want to hear your story. We want to learn more about Steve, but also we want to find out how God really has played a part and influenced your life. So, brother, tell everybody who is Steve Roterman and, what are you about?
I will. So, ditto's not going to work for this podcast, right? Just say ditto. But
Unfortunately, no.
no, hey, thank you, and hello to your audience. And yeah, I'm a normal guy that went through a life of trauma, like pretty much everybody else has. Maybe a little bit different, but I was abandoned by my mother at the age of 4. Um, and my father was an alcoholic off and on throughout my life and belittled me, told me I wouldn't amount to anything, that basically I wasn't worthy enough to be in his presence, just by his actions. Not that he actually said that, but just, I was never good enough for him in school. I was never good enough for him doing chores. I was always doing something wrong. And in the midst of, growing up at the age of 6, 7 years old, I was sexually molested by a neighbor in a construction trailer. And, he it went on for a season, a short season. It wasn't for a long time, but, he would say, "Hey, we can't tell anybody about this or we're going to get in a lot of trouble." And man, I didn't like when I was in trouble with my father. It hurt. And there was a lot of shame there when it happened. So I kept my mouth shut. I never said anything. I didn't tell anybody until I was in with a Christian counselor at the age of 45. So I harbored that and held that my entire life. And growing up, I was called to the Lord at 21 years old. Went forward at a church. Uh, Felt called into ministry after I got heavily involved with Promise Keepers Men movement. If you remember that movement that went
Oh, yeah.
on,
Hmm.
um, and then I got married and started a family in '95. And um, my wife, a few years later, became a addict to prescription medicine. And not knowing it at the time, I had codependency, and that really started to flare up in the midst of that addiction. And for 13 years, we battled each other. My codependency battled her addiction. Her addiction tried to fight my codependency. Um, there were some good seasons in there, and I finally stepped into ministry, became a pastor, children's pastor, men's leader, Christian counselor. Eventually, uh, stepped out of that church and planted another church. And unfortunately, the demons came back and took my wife down, and she was nodding off in the front row of church. And I was just so shameful and so embarrassed and so angry. And I walked away from the church, handed it over to another church. I walked away from ministry, I walked away from God. And I said, well, if you're not going to fix this, I'll try. And the next 2 years were just complete hell as we just battled each other over that. And got into a Christian counselor who told me I had the codependency.
Hmm.
Uh, I was there 15 minutes. It's a funny story because I'm not there 15 minutes paying this guy. And he's like, yeah, you're part of the problem. exactly like that. He's just like, yeah, you're part of the problem. I was just like, what are you talking about? And I was about ready to leave. And he's, a little bit later as he was talking, he's like, yeah, you have codependency. You're just as much as an issue as she is. But the good thing is, we can get you fixed. And I was so mad I wasn't going to come back. But I went home, got on the computer, searched codependency, and I saw that connected through my entire life. I was like, wow, this guy's on to something. He's right. So the spirit led me back. And for 6 years, I was with this gentleman. And he did a wonderful work on me and told me that I needed to find my identity in Christ. And I told him, I was a pastor for many years. What do you mean? I know who Jesus is. And he said, no, you need to find your identity and who you really are in Christ. You need to go from that adoptive son to the full inheritance son that totally understands that he has everything in the kingdom. And I was like, wow. And we went down that road and that journey. And that was life changing for me. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, when the healing really started to begin and take off. And
Interesting.
unfortunately, I separated from that wife, got remarried, and started going back to church, started getting back involved, and had a bunch of walls up. And then for the next 10 years after that, it was wondering if God would ever use me in ministry again, and just being attacked left and right that, oh, you're not good enough for ministry, you'll never be in ministry again, and that warfare that just goes on. And so here we are. He told me to write a book, which I took a year to do, or a little under a year. Launched it this spring, and it's God's imperfect plan is perfect, and kind of goes along with that codependency. I used to tell children, "Hey, God's got this perfect plan for you. Everything's going to be perfect in your life, and He's going to line all this stuff up for you." And I got to thinking, well, my plan really sucks. I didn't have a good plan at all. I
Yeah.
I was dealt the wrong end of the stick on that one. And he showed me through a bunch of different ways that he was there the entire time. And that's where the book came from.
Well,
And I wrote that book, I think, more for my healing and final chapter to close everything out than it was to be a top bookseller. Because I'm not a writer.
I'm not a writer who has written a book and
Right.
got it published. Okay, I got you. The in your story that you were just telling us, the your wife nodding off in the front row of the church, and you feeling like you needed to pull away from the church, and work on that relationship and that issue. Um, Looking back on that, do you feel as though um, God may have pushed you away from the church to go get a different perspective, or do you feel like it was more you losing faith and saying, "Hey, I need to, go take care of this because God maybe let you down"? I'm curious what your relationship was with, God at that time when that happened.
Well, at that time, I viewed God as I viewed my earthly father. He loves me. He maybe doesn't know how to deal with me, and he's just waiting for me to mess up so he can just unleash his anger on me.
Wow.
So when you have that view of God, it really opens up the door to just be taken down by the enemy. Uh, that's, you know, when we think of the devil, we think of his warehouse of, pitchforks and evil and horror movies. And that's a nice section back in the corner of the store. But his main section up front is if I can get these people not to believe in themselves and who they are in Christ, that's so easy. I'll win with that. I could scare a couple people over here and possess a couple people over here, but all these Christians, I'm just going to make them not shine and not be loved, but think
Wow.
they're good Christians. And, we just never get over that hump. So I don't, I didn't feel God telling me to stay, but I didn't feel God pushing me away. I think I just shut the door. I just was like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this with you anymore.
Wow.
And, you know, I'm sure I broke his heart, but he was with me standing there the entire way and he brought me through this healing. So,
Yeah. That's something that we talk about here often is the spiritual warfare aspect of things. One of the reasons that I make a point of bringing it up in certain conversations is because I think people go too far one direction with it. Either everything in their life is spiritual warfare. Oh, I spilled my coffee. It must be spiritual warfare, right? Or they go the other way and they're like, look, if I'm not looking at somebody with hooves and horns and a red tail sticking out the back, then it's not spiritual warfare, right? It's just coincidence and circumstance.
Right.
As you've gone through your trials and tribulations, I mean, from the horrific things you dealt with when you were younger, to the healing that took place through there, Christian counseling, and the issues with your first wife. Um, Looking back now, where can you identify some spots of absolute spiritual warfare that you just nod your head and go, "Yep, I was being dragged down. I was being, pushed away." What can you see looking back with that 2020 vision?
That whole story is full of spiritual warfare. From my mother being self centered, living for herself, spiritual warfare. My father, you know, being wrecked by his father, spiritual warfare. Um, Me being drug into a construction trailer and tricked into this act, you know, spiritual warfare. Why? Because this guy's going to grow up so shameful and so feels like he's not worth anything that I'm really going to have this one won. And that was the whole thing. And then, the spiritual warfare that happened with my wife, although that wasn't me, that was her issue that he was attacking her.
Yeah,
Now, how did he use that for me? Well, she's taking drugs because I'm not good enough. She's taking drugs because she wants to escape me. And that's how he uses that. So then he puts that wedge in, you know.
yeah,
He comes to kill, steal, and destroy,
right.
plain and simple. Well, he's not killing us, but he can if we think less than and then we want to take our lives, unfortunately. What's he stealing? What's he destroying? Well, he destroys family. He destroys your identity. He destroys who you think you should be instead of who you really are. And I just see it every single day in that story that I lived.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. Um, my goodness, I mean that's a lot. Um, Again, you can say, "Hey, I encountered all of the spiritual warfare. A lot of things were." Have you ever asked yourself why? Like, why me? Maybe you were destined for, great and powerful things and he wants to keep you down, something like that. Maybe the ministry.
I did at one time question why. Why are you going to call me in a ministry and then have me feel like I'm in complete hell?
Mhm.
You know? And again, I take it back to the things that we were brought up in the church, the things that we all believe, the things that we were told to believe, and not really searching deeper than that. We believe it because it was told to us and taught to us.
Yeah.
That's spiritual warfare. That's religion. You
Right.
know, that's not building a relationship. That's not, you know, it was, we talked about this on the other show, but it was that turning point in my life was in that day. It was in John. In that day, that I'm in the Father's in me, we're in you, we're doing this together, and you're perfect in our eyes. And now let's step out of the old and into the new and move forward. And, you know, let's do that. That's a transition point that I'm trying to bring to everybody else now. Because I was in church for the longest time. I was a pastor, but I wasn't transformed. I was still a jerk. I'd go home and tell my wife how, much I didn't like her because of her addiction and she was a loser and she's just like one of those street drug addicts. And you know what I mean? It's like
Wow.
that vileness just comes out and you take it out on your kids, you know? and I screwed up my kid. Wait, you were loving on all these people, but then you come home and you destroy us? Where's the love of Christ in that?
Yeah.
Well, if we don't have that spiritual armor, if we don't know what we're doing, if we don't know what we're talking about, if we don't know that we signed up to be in an army, not skip through the daisies petting unicorns. I mean, we have to be prepared for this stuff. And it's ongoing. And it could be ongoing every day if you're not attuned to it.
Nice. What what's the book about? God's perfect plan or imperfect plan, right? God's imperfect plan is perfect. So, tell me what led you to write that, and what's the book about for people who haven't had a chance to pick it up yet?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. God's got this perfect plan for you. He's going to set it all out for you. You're going to have a yellow house. You're going to be married, 3 kids, dog named Boomer, and you're going to be an accountant at the big firm you want to be at. Well, what happens when you have a blue house and your wife wanted a cat? She doesn't want kids, and you're, you're working at a gas station. you know,
Right. Yeah.
it's like, God, what happened here? Because this plan is not good at all. And it's about we can make choices our entire life that have consequences. Some of those may be good, some of those may be bad. That's our fault, that's our choice. It's those things that we were inherited with that we had no choice in. That's why I was saying God's plan was sucked, because I didn't choose to have a mom leave me. I didn't choose to have a dad who was an alcoholic and belittle me. I didn't choose to get sexually molested in a trailer. I didn't choose to have a wife turn to pain medication and destroy our family. I didn't choose to try to destroy my family. And what started out as journaling as very angry towards God turned into, wow, you were in this entire story. You were there the entire time walking with me. And he showed me along the way different points where he was at. And it's like, wow. And look where I'm at today. Your plan may be imperfect in my eyes, but it's perfect in the kingdom realm. It's perfect the way you laid it out.
Now you mentioned, and on the last podcast we had a chance to talk about this, but you did mention just now that he's been with you the whole time,
Yeah.
and you had mentioned to me before some moments when you knew he was with you.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
Tell us about that because I had a couple of additional questions about those things, if you don't mind.
yeah, I was told during this journey of who I was and find my identity in Christ that I needed to find a place where I did not know Jesus Christ, that I didn't come to know him. I had no clue of him whatsoever. In my pain, where was he? And you get in a quiet spot and you get into this meditation mode. And he showed me within minutes that he was standing in that construction trailer when I was getting molested. And that was a pivotal point going, wow, he's actually there. And then I was led into, hey, where is a point in your life that maybe wasn't tragic, that maybe things were going really well for you, that God was there? And I was on my grandparents' farm in Missouri. We used to go there every weekend. It was heaven to me. I describe it in the book as that's heaven, if I can ever, describe it in my own words. And I was on a hay wagon with a walking stick in my hand, playing air guitar and singing Motley Crue and just having a concert to myself and loving it. But Jesus was sitting on that trailer, just smiling, just enjoying it. And once you start asking those types of questions and you start getting answers and you can see those answers, God's been there entire time. We're just not awoken to the fact that he's there. And that's those are two things that really helped me get the book out. Those are two things that really helped me moving forward,
Sure.
knowing that I'm living in this union here.
As you're putting the book together and you're realizing these things, when you have that realization that during this absolutely horrible point in my life, right when I'm in the trailer, uh, that God was there with me. Does that manifest itself to you as a comforting thing, or is that more of a "how could you let this happen to me," type of reaction? What goes on emotionally with that young child that's still dealing with that when you come to those conclusions about God?
It was healing.
It was
He wasn't standing there with his arms crossed like, what are you
right.
doing? Tisk, tisk,
Okay.
tisk. He was standing. I can't really say that he was, doing anything but just present. I know your pain. I know what's going on. And when I wrote the book, I wrote it to that 7-year-old kid. And I think that, like I said, I think the book was to just finally close all those chapters and let that 7-year-old boy free.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It really is. People write for all sorts of reasons. They get called to write for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah.
For you, it really was. It sounds to me like it was therapeutic. It was to kind of get your story out to help others who may be dealing with these things, but also then, yeah, to get your closure on this, horrible topic, this event.
Yeah.
Um, so that makes a lot of sense. Um, if that's why you were writing the book, then you have a podcast too that you are, putting together that you're kind of getting started, right?
Yes.
Right. And name of the podcast is
Walk right, a path to healing.
nice. And so is the podcast about a similar subject with the book? Is the podcast about something that's totally different? What's the goal of that in that media, that medium with that vehicle?
Yeah. The podcast is, I call it a devotional. I don't interview anybody. It's just me. Do you remember Paul Harvey?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, I do. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. The rest of the story.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to embarrass you with the age, but we're old enough to say, yeah, we can
We're there.
remember Paul Harvey.
That's right.
So it's a story and scripture and tying it all together. That's where the inspiration kind of came from. So you'll hear stories of my past. You'll hear stories that were in the book. You'll just hear like just weird history facts, um, and then tie it into the Bible and a story. Um, but most of it is just my life and seeing God in my life everywhere, and then putting that with scripture. So it's just a variety. It's kind of fun. It's only 13 to 20 minutes long, so it's not a long um, podcast, just enough to get somebody inspired and move on with their day.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So that's written to pretty much anybody who wants to listen to it. That's
Right.
not necessarily targeted. That's for the
Yeah.
general populace.
Yeah. It's not targeted to recovery. It's not, I mean, it's got everything in it. But, again, um, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. When you say the word recovery, you think of
Right.
those people, those alcoholics and drug users.
Yeah,
Everybody could be in recovery. You know, everybody's hurting from something.
for sure.
We're recovering from life.
Right. Well, so the book is in service of, folks who are in recovery in a lot of ways.
It will help people with codependency and recovery, but it's just my story and showing where God was in it and then what happens after that. And the end is just, what is that plan? What is God's plan for us? If it's not a blue house and green car and two dogs and the job we want, it's love. It's self-sacrificial love. He just wants to be involved and wrapped in every single part of our day and every single part of our being, and just wants us to go out and be that light and love. And some days we may go out and have to put our shields up and take a few flaming arrows, but for the most part, that's the plan. The plan is for us to, you know, be that love and light, not be self-centered, put others before us, love our neighbors, and then, you know what? Go grab our neighbor and teach that to them. Make disciples of them. Make, you know, as many people know that love. you know. I used to be on a mission to bring everybody to heaven that I can, you know.
Used to be.
My mission now is to just show the love of Jesus Christ and let the Spirit work with them, you know. I
Nice.
Heaven's going to be awesome. It's going to be, it is. It's going to be so awesome. I can't wait. But, you know, what about heaven here now? The kingdom's here now.
Yeah,
Why can't we partake in that a little bit? Why do we have to sit back and just, make sure that ticket doesn't go anywhere, and we keep checking the drawer every once in a while to make sure it's still there, but all along we're not transforming.
for sure. Absolutely. Now, you do reach out to folks who are in recovery and in that mode in terms of your Christ-centered 12-step recovery community that
Yes.
you've kind of put together. So clearly, it's on your heart to help folks, in one way or another. And then this seems to be a way to help folks who have specifically gone through some of the things that you've encountered in your life.
Yes.
So, tell us about that, why you started that, and what that's about.
I started a 12-step program because after I left a Celebrate Recovery program, I still help out at church now with Celebrate Recovery. And I left one night and met a gentleman that just, man, our spirits connected, and he just fired me up. And got in the car and I prayed. And I always do this. Father, you brought us together. What's the reason? Am I here for him? He here for me? We here together? Do you have something to say about this? Let me know. And he said, yeah, I wanted him to get you all excited because I want you to do the 12-step program that you're always thinking about, that is blended with my identity in Christ. And that's where that came from. And I started on it. And I'm telling you, again, I'm not a writer, but I sat down and just hammered out. I mean, my fingers couldn't stop typing. This just stuff flowed out of me. And it's 12 steps with your identity in Christ. It's 10 principles. It's just like Celebrate Recovery. It's not to replace any kind of step program. It's an alternative when you need it. It's there for anybody going through any kind of trouble, anxiety, depression, pornography, alcoholics, overeating, anger, um, workaholic, compulsive behavior, any unhealthy habit that you have, it's there for them.
Wow. I mean, that encompasses a lot.
Yeah,
When you start talking about any unhealthy habit that we have that could fall in that category, that's a lot of habits.
it is. And why wouldn't you want to recover from that?
Sure. Absolutely.
Oh, those people. Well, he's an alcoholic, but I'm not going to do anything about my overeating.
Right. Nothing wrong with me. It's
I'm just
always somebody
jolly.
else.
I'm just jolly. Yeah.
I should have used that one.
Yeah. You know, as we're talking, getting a spiritual attack, a hamburger, that's pretty much a flaming arrow to me all the time. So I try to, I try to do good, but sometimes
Exactly.
Whataburger here in Texas is just calling my name and flashing lights when I come by.
I understand. I understand all too well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not a little guy by any stretch. The yeah, father of seven, I mean, we are called to be parents, and we are called to disciple our own children first. Um, I mean, I assume that you have, instilled faith in your children, as part of their child rearing. Has that gone? Is that something you've done? Made a particular effort to raise them, in the faith, and how has that gone with them?
My three, my two older boys are, they grew up in a church. I baptized them. They saw me in ministry. They were in ministry. They were helping. Um, Nothing to do with the Lord right now.
Hmm.
Um, that's unfortunate. And, you know, my second youngest is just a love and light. I mean, he's just, he's 15 now, prays for everybody. Um, you know, he's always, hey, Dad, can you pray for this guy at school or this girl at school? Just always, just a huge heart.
Hmm.
And he, unfortunately, was in his mother's womb when she was taking medicine. So he's slightly autistic. He's
Oh,
got a just a little bit of the spectrum, but just a genius. I mean, honor student, straight A's, just photographic memory. I mean, just you could see the borderline autistic there, but he he's doing well. The others, well, my youngest is 7, and he's just now coming up, and we still go to church, and we're very involved, and we love that community. But I've got one that's in Kuwait right now in the Air Force,
yeah.
um, and
Wow.
I don't know where he is spiritually, and then uh, I've got a 20-year-old daughter that's wrapped up with codependency with a guy. They're getting ready to move out and get their own apartment, which we're just like, you know, we don't like it, but I mean, we're going to support you. We're going to be love, And then my 17-year-old son's about ready to graduate high school and he's going into the Navy. So,
Nice.
but
A lot of military there.
yeah, unfortunately, none of them are going into ministry, but um, they probably saw
Not
that
yet.
it took me down.
Well, not yet, right? You don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
That being in the military changes you just a little bit,
Yeah.
so they may come out with totally different perspectives and maybe full appreciation.
Sons always come home. All I can do is pray,
Right. Right
you
on.
know.
Right on. I love that. The have you run into what sort of spiritual warfare have you run into with that especially? Because whenever we try to connect with our young people, whenever we try to help those young lions kind of get attached to their faith and maybe build, has it just been like the resistance, for instance, with your older ones, that have said, hey, I really don't want to be a part of this, or have you run into other things that have kind of pulled back maybe through society or what we're all dealing with as a country right now.
Yeah, attacks, I should say, are pretty common. Um, although, I'm healed, I can say with confidence that I'm healed, but the triggers are always there. And, getting ready to launch a ministry. Oh, this ministry is not going to do anything. Oh, this community is not going to help anybody. And it's like, wait a minute. That's doesn't align with the word and what God's telling me to do. I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to go down this road.
Right.
You know, Before there's a time where it would take you out of the game for 3, 4 days. You know, you're just a wreck. But it's identifying those, and I believe what Paul said is it in Colossians that you have to take those things, trap them in your mind, and then command them to obey the word. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but
Sure.
uh, that takes me down. And then when I'm with my kids and I love them so much and I want them to do right, and this is my whole passion. If I can help somebody get out of trouble or unstuck faster than I did and save a family, save a marriage, that's the passion. So when I see my own kids doing that, the devil wants to draw me right back into codependency. You're going to fix them. Go ahead and fix them. Fight with them. Tell them they need, counseling. Tell them they need depression. So they start a fight with you. And he just wants to divide and split that.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. And then I'll go to church and I'll preach the word or speak at a church and come home. And then uh, it's like, why does my wife and I want, why is there tension like a fight's going to start? And then it's like, wait a minute. I always have to remember, it's like in Matthew, uh, you know, the devil comes immediately after the word,
Mhm.
you know, and he just, if I could go and preach a great service to a bunch of people and then come home and fight with my wife, he wins. I lose. So it's identifying those arrows. I call them triggers, but it's identifying that. And it's very real. And you can catch yourself. I don't know if you've experienced that yourself doing all
Yes.
these podcasts, but you leave and come out and all of a sudden your wife will say something cross to you, not meaning anything out of it, and you like want to attack her. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not who I am in Christ. You know what I mean? I don't know if, like I said, somebody has to relate to that. I mean, not be the only weirdo. Somebody's got to be able to do it.
You are
But
certainly not the only weirdo.
that's what happens.
Yeah.
And it's being aware of all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a conversation with another lady on this podcast about the way that the devil comes at you in those times.
Hmm.
And I love the way that you described that, especially from the book of Matthew, where it's after you feel like you've really accomplished something,
Yeah.
and you're feeling a little good about yourself. Maybe you're starting to have a little too much pride about it, that kind of thing. And that's when, it comes in because the devil doesn't want you to feel good about it and have you go do more of the good works. He wants you to start feeling bad about it so that you start to go, it doesn't matter. I did all this work and, it didn't really make any difference.
Yeah.
But there seems to be, as I talk to folks, and I've interviewed so many people on these topics on this podcast, that it's one of the things that's kind of stood out is that there seems to be an original wound that we all deal with. Um, and the way that the devil finds his way in, with this lady, it was something different with you. It's the codependency and it's the self-talk that just tears you down. That says,
Hmm.
who would listen to me? I'm nobody. I'm a failure, right?
Yep.
But that original wound, he always goes back to that until you absolutely shut it down and can heal it. Do you feel like he's always kind of returned to that one spot for you? And is that wound still an open wound, or do you feel like you've been able to close that?
I feel like I've been able to close it, but he wants to rip it open.
Okay, so he's still intent on that original wound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He can't get me with pornography. He can't get me with drinking. He can't get me with drugs. He can't, you know what I mean? He can get me with Steve, you suck and nobody's going to like you and you're never going to amount to anything. That's where he can get me.
yeah.
And that's my wound. That's been my wound my entire life.
Well, I love the way you said that because it's the wound is healed, but he rips it open.
Yeah.
It does seem that way with the more people that I talk to that he's so intent on that original wound that he doesn't even look for anything else.
No,
You
because
feel
it's
that
a
way
waste
too.
of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's yeah, interesting, interesting. I appreciate you letting me throw my theory out there, a little bit, but
Yeah,
mm,
no, it's totally true. I mean, I have confidence and peace. I can say I'm recovered, but I'm definitely still transforming. I'm definitely getting my armor thicker,
mhm,
get my spiritual mind stronger, you know. But I can relate to those things and I know when he's attacking me. But sometimes I may move a certain way and he just gets that arrow in just a little bit, just enough to make it bleed,
yeah,
you know.
absolutely. We well pivot just a little bit here because
Yeah.
you mentioned we've talked about discipleship, passing things on, building that in people. We're all called to do that, to build discipleship in some format. Um, the place to start that is at home. We've talked about how you've kind
Hmm.
of tried to do that with your own children, but is that a calling that's on your heart heavily right now? And how do you go about doing that in your life,
Yeah,
these
of
days?
course. We're all called to do it, like you said.
Mhm.
Um, and how do I do it? It's loving, you know, sometimes I say it this way. Sometimes it's to show Jesus without talking about Jesus. Sometimes that builds more disciples in the long run than it does. Hey, you're supposed to go out and preach the word. Hey, you're supposed to go out and do this. Hey, you're supposed to go out and do that. Hey, you know what I mean? Um, I try to pivot to be like Jesus, to where people are like, "Why are you so different?" Well, why don't you sit down and let me tell you? Because you're about to get a mouthful. But
Right. There you go.
you know, but yeah, it's the book of Acts, the transition all over again. We've got to persevere through our own struggles to get to the point to where people are going to connect with us and align with us and can come under us and start to build that discipleship. If you're a complete wreck, why am I going to believe that? God you're believing, you know? So
Hmm.
we also have the devil using people who think they're Christians, you know, that are going out making bad disciples, and you could call that false teachings. You can call that, religion. You can call that whatever you want, cults or, but there's people going out there just doing the same army as we're trying to do. Which one's going to be bigger?
Sure. Sure. In your practice and in your pastorship that you've done in the past, have you been more denominational or have you been more, non-denominational?
Um, I was a pastor in a Baptist church.
Hmm.
Um, so I came up through there, went through Liberty. Uh, I did a course through Liberty, extended course through Liberty, and transitioned out of that into a non-denominational church when I planted a church with their support, their help, by the way,
Yeah.
because they weren't a Baptist church that was, I guess, I don't know how to say it. They were tied to the Baptist congregation, but they weren't. They were more independent Baptist, maybe I should say.
Okay.
So I went out and started that, and then, quite honestly, I started to question some things. I'm like, how can you, because the more I studied Greek, the more I studied the Bible, the more I studied, history. I'm like, how can you preach a sermon from Paul, but then try to intertwine it with something from Matthew, Mark, Luke, because some of that stuff was going against religion, and the stuff Paul was teaching was kind of down the road a little bit. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I started to question some of this stuff and do some more research. And it's like, you know what? I think it's safe to just be non denominational at this point. And even non denominational, nobody's perfect. No one has it right, but you have to question why there's 44,000 denominations. We don't agree with something that, we all want to be right when it comes to the Bible. We
Hmm.
all want to be correct in our theology. And if you don't agree with me, I'm just going to go start a church on the corner. And then when
Right.
somebody doesn't agree with me in my church, then they go pull people. Oh yeah, we believe that too. And then they go start one. And that's where we're at. Why isn't there just one? We love Jesus. We follow Jesus.
Right.
So long
Right.
answer, but
I love the answer. I appreciate it.
yeah,
The reason that I ask that, and I ask it a lot, is because I am of the mind that the single biggest, most successful spiritual warfare campaign that the devil's ever launched was denominations,
yeah,
and basically taking the largest group of people in the whole world, Christians, and getting us to disagree with one another and
separation.
splintering our faction from within. Because
Yeah,
if we all ever put that away and said, "Hey, we all love Jesus. We all want to have this relationship, and we should all come together and just allow for some differences." There'd be no beating that army
right,
ever. There'd be no way. I mean, you strap on the armor of God, you got the lions of God in the front line. There's absolutely no way to stop that army. The only way to beat that army is to get it to divide and conquer itself from within, and I feel like we do that. I don't know if you have seen that at all. What your thought is on what I just threw out there? Maybe I'm blaspheming. I don't mean to be.
I agree with you 100%. I
Really?
really do. If we stopped focusing on heaven as a place to get to and started focusing on, look, what you've inherited, and look how you can transform now and show the kingdom now, you'll be ready for heaven,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know who said it, but I didn't coin this, but it's a great saying. Would the world be a better place if everybody thought and acted like you did?
Hmm.
And that's something to ponder.
Good
And
question.
yeah, I mean, that's a pretty powerful question. So, you know, why are we still struggling with it? Why can't we feed people here at home? We've got
Yeah.
how many churches that are so wealthy? You could take out poverty. You know what I mean? It's like you want to talk about spiritual warfare? It's just, it's us. It's, I've been to a lot of churches that had the country club feel. They'll take care of everybody in that church. I mean, rock solid meal. Somebody goes down, they have, you know, meal menus and people sign up and take care of one another. But what are we doing outside the church with other churches?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So,
I love that question to be poised that way. So,
yeah,
there's one of as we kind of bring this home,
yeah,
there's an observation that I've had too since I've been doing this. I've noticed coming out of the woodwork more and more and more. There is a huge movement of young lions that are out there, men and women, who are just fierce in their belief. They are just devoted to their relationship with Jesus, absolute believers in Christianity. Most are non-denominational, but it's just a matter of I believe, I trust, I know that this is there, and they're willing to fight for it. But what I see with this group of folks is that they come together, they have this emotion and this power and this faith, but there's nobody leading them.
yeah.
And what do we need to do if you have a thought on this? And there's no right or wrong answer. I just appreciate the fact that you're jumping into this conversation with me. What can we do to get our leaders or become leaders ourselves to, help go through the wall first and lead this group of young lions so that we can start to repair some of this damage?
Start preaching kingdom living. You know,
Yeah, tell me
too
more
many
about that.
churches are behavior modification.
Hmm.
Too many churches are, you know, hey, you weren't good enough this week, but here's some good stuff we can teach you so you're better next week. And not every church, don't get me wrong,
No, I
but a
hear you
lot
though.
of churches keep people stuck. They really do. Again, spiritual warfare. It's religion. Didn't
Right,
Jesus come to abolish all that? And you've got then you got the extreme to where people are deconstructing. I don't like that word, but they're
right.
deconstructing and they're walking away from the church and doing everything online. Well, we need community. So I feel that's a way that there's even more separation. I may not believe everything my pastor preaches at church. And I believe, I don't believe in an angry God anymore. I really don't. I believe, once you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you've seen the Father, you've seen me. And Jesus says that if Jesus is the exact image of who his Father was, you know, he's not out there karate punching people and flipping them over and whatnot. He was just complete love. And if I'm wrong from just going out and being complete love, then I guess I'm wrong. But it's better than going out and going, my denomination's right. Um, you know, my theology's right. This is right, and it's just a shame that there's just so much separation going on. So what you're saying is we need somebody that can go out and preach that kingdom, preach that discipleship. Because, just with the recent events with Charlie Kirk, there's so many hungry people and they want more than what they've learned in church. And they want some of the things that, Charlie lived it.
Yeah.
Again, I may not agree with all of his theology, but you know what? He was pushing for the kingdom. And we just need leaders like that to rise up in our churches, you know.
Yeah. I love that. Very well said too. I mean,
Thank you.
just wow, great answer. And thank you for jumping in on
Yeah.
on that. But
Hey,
yeah, I
we could turn
appreciate
this into a 3-hour show. I got a soapbox I'll get on. I love Jesus. I'll talk about
it.
Jesus all day long.
There you go. I just can kind of tell with the energy, when I've got somebody who I know is just, vibing, and I'm like, this guy, I bet he's going to understand what I'm telling him right now. So,
Yeah.
one of the things that I started the show based on was, that as Christians have allowed themselves to kind of be pushed around, and that we need to stand up. We have to wake up the lions. And we have to go out there and we've got to, proclaim our faith. But it's also, about building and it's about leading. And at some point, we need to unite the faith, if we're
Yeah.
going to make it as a faith. because it's under fire, man. It's really under fire all over the globe, and it's a little unsettling when you look at it that way.
It is. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, yeah,
If I can get one person unstuck at a time and God can transform them, then we'll do it that way.
right on. Absolutely. If every one of us went out there and impacted one life, we
Yeah.
would double the size of Christianity overnight,
Yeah.
right? So I love that. I really, really do. I think, too often people they hear the word discipleship or they think about building discipleship, and I think they feel like they have to do a Promise Keepers event. They have to be in front of 50,000 people giving a speech and getting them all whooped into a frenzy, and it's like that's really not what it is, right?
It's not. It's, you know, one on one. It's, I see the same person at the gas station every day, and I'm like, how's my favorite gas station employee? You know? And oh, by the way, did you know you're loved and you're awesome? And you turn and walk away.
Yeah,
And you do that for 3 months. Eventually they're like, why are you so nice to me? Well, I know Jesus and he loves you and he wants to have a relationship with you. And I bet that if you go home and you sit somewhere quiet and you ask Jesus, are you in me? I took that from somebody else that told me to say that, but are you in me? He'll answer you. He'll answer you eventually. May not
yeah,
be right that second, but he'll show you something. I tell people all the time in those situations, we've seen thousands of sunsets, right? But have you ever had that one that God's like, I made this one for you? And you just notice it and you're just wrapped in awe in it for 10 minutes. You know, he's there, he's working. We just need to get on the same page. But if I go into that gas station and be like, hey, you're a sinner and God doesn't like you, he can't look at you, and you're going to go to hell if you don't say this prayer. Well, what's that going to do? That just turns people off.
yeah.
What about the people that were saved prior to the 200 years that was even developed? You know, you got to say this prayer. Well, what happened to all those people before that? Because there's a lot of saved people out there before that, you
Right.
know. And I'm going off on a tangent now, but it's just being that one on one. You don't have to have a group. You don't have to have a Promise Keepers. You don't have to have a church. You just have to have love. That's it.
Love it. Love that. You're obviously doing your part, Steve. With the book that you've written, with the way that you speak, the heart that you put out there, with your 12-step recovery community that's out there. I encourage everybody to check all these things out. How can all the people who have been listening to you and I sit here and go back and forth, how can they reach out to Steve and hear more about what you've got to say, brother?
The easiest way is walkrightministries.com. It has the book, it has who I am, it has, I'm a coach. I coach people through stuff like this. Um, it has the speaking if you want me to come to your church and do, Christianity verbal judo, man, I'm all for it.
Excellent.
If you like the stuff that we're brushing on and talking about, I'll light a fire under some people's seats, but um, it has that, and then it has the community. They can reach the community there as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'll make sure that gets into the show notes. I'll even make sure it's spelled right. That's a private joke between Steve and I. I tried to email him the other night, got it all wrong, totally messed it up. I'm going to blame it on spiritual warfare, but we're
Amen.
gonna we're gonna go from there. Steve, I gotta hand it to you. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I could talk to you for another hour, and I look up and we're out of time. So
Yeah.
you're a great guest. I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for having these conversations with people. Really and truly, I know that today's episode is impacting somebody, and for that, I thank you for that.
No, thanks for having me on again. With the other one we did, this is just so much fun. Our spirits are connecting for some reason and it's just a joy. And yeah, we could probably, hopefully we can just have a friendship outside of this and just communicate. So
No, I
Thank
look
you.
forward to
Thanks for
that.
having me.
I really
Yeah.
do. And thank you for coming on. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, folks, you heard it here. It is time. That's right. It's time to wake up the lions. More than that, though, it's time for you to take your rightful place with your brothers and sisters and let them hear you roar. Folks, the world is ready. You're ready. You just have to believe it.